It'll take me about a minute to get set up here. Try not to chatter too much. Oh, dear. I could tell you why I'm late, but you wouldn't believe me anyway, so I'm not going to bother. We're talking about Peter Rabbit today, and then we're doing Winnie the Pooh. And besides my portable computer terminal word processor, I brought along this. How many of you have ever seen a Braille book before? Now you have. Good. You don't have to see it anymore.
It's very different having a professor that's blind. It's exciting. It's really interesting. I remember the first day we all came in here, and I think everybody's chin was down on their desk going, oh my God, he's doing this, and he's reading the syllabus back to us, and when he made a mistake, he went back and knew he made a mistake, and it was like, oh my gosh, it was amazing.
Amazing is putting it mildly. Meet Dr. Craig Werner, blind since birth, an assistant professor of English at Buffalo State College as he teaches children's classics to his students in Ketchum Hall. Educated in special schools for the blind in the Bronx, he received his Ph.D. at Harvard in 1978. And achieving his cherished goal as one of the few blind college professors in the nation was no easy task.
When I was in high school, all the books were in Braille. I only had to walk a few feet to the library, and there was all my resource material. When I was in college, I had to recruit readers to read books that simply weren't available in Braille. I had to contact tape organizations and Braille transcribing organizations to get books that normally you just couldn't go to your bookstore and buy. And it was difficult, but I wouldn't say that I thought of college as an everyday struggle.
What made you decide to become a teacher?
Well, when I was in 7th grade, I had a very wonderful teacher who himself was blind. This was back at the Institute for the Blind, and he suggested to me that I had a talent or a flair for talking about literature. And I said, if Dr. Santana can do all this, he was not a doctor at the time, but I said, if Mr. Santana can do all this, maybe I can do something too. And that's really when I first started thinking about teaching.
Tell me about your first class as a teacher. Were there any problems?
My first job was not in the States, but in Japan. I couldn't find work in this country, so I went to teach at a small school for women. I faced a class who had probably never talked to a blind person before. I'm sure my students felt very awkward with me, and I felt very awkward with them. I couldn't speak Japanese. All the students were Japanese. It was a very, very awkward first day. And I think what's important to stress is that the awkwardness worked both ways, them to me and me to them. But I must say that here at Buffalo State College, we have two things going for us. We have a great number of students who really are interested in furthering their education, and we also have a great number of faculty members who are interested in helping them with their education. It's a dedicated place for student and teacher alike.
Dr. Werner probably is one of the most thorough professors I've had in comparison to people who have sight.
I enjoy his class very much. I think to be blind and to teach, you got to be real brilliant, and he's brilliant and he's real good.
How do you recognize the students that, when they raise their hands for an answer?
Well, they get sore arms. I ask them to tell me who they are as they speak. I'm sure this embarrasses them, but after all, they know who I am. Why shouldn't I know who they are?
I think the hardest part is like when he asks for responses, we all end up raising our hands, and then we have to look back and realize that, and it gets kind of funny. Everybody just kind of speaks out.
His directions are fine. Occasionally, some people switch seats, and then it'll confuse them. But I think nowadays we're all sitting in the same places, and he knows our names by our voices.
A question most asked is, how does a blind professor grade his students' papers?
The students may go into a word processing room and may create their papers directly on a computer. They may write the papers on the screen, they may store them on the disk of the big mainframe computer, and they may, if they like, print them on paper for them to read. This is not where it ends, though. They may also send the papers to my computer account. Then using the VersaBraille, I can read their papers and generate separate comment sheets, which I print on my printer and hand back to them.
I hate to say this, Doctor, but it seems to be quite easy to crib in your class.
I hate to tell you, but it is easy to crib in my class. It's true. And I have to realize that. I can do a certain amount of policing myself. If I hear papers rustling unduly, I can walk over to the student and ask if there's trouble. If I hear people talking, I can ask them to be quiet. One thing I have to be very careful to do is not to jump to conclusions. I like to treat my students as adults. I will tell you, though, that I do expect compliance in my classes, and I do expect moral, decent behavior.
He demands a lot out of his class, and I think he gets a lot of respect, too.
You don't treat him as a blind person. You treat him with a little bit more respect because due to the fact that he is blind, we find ourselves a lot easier to open. Instead of raising your hand, waiting for somebody to pick you, you sit there and we actually have great debates because of this.
He's very thorough. He has a sense of humor.
Comments? You're all budding critics now. What do you make of this? I can't agree with that, I'm sorry. Absolutely not.
What do you feel is your greatest challenge?
My greatest challenge is keeping up with all of the work, all of the time, with all of my colleagues. I have a lot of responsibilities here. I chair 2 committees. I chair a committee outside of Buffalo State College, which comes under the heading of community service. I have reports to write, I have exams to grade, I have students to see, I have articles to write for publication, and I don't want to fall into the habit or the trap of thinking that I should deserve special attention.
It's really amazing how he uses his other senses, like touch and feel and smell, and just by kind of like using those senses, how we just take sight just for so granted.
I don't feel it's any detriment at all. In fact, in some ways, I think he's made it easier for me.
I get tired of handicapped folks saying, oh, the non-disabled don't understand. They treat me as if I'm retarded, or they treat me as if I'm crippled. Well, we need to make a response to their treatment. We need to understand why they might be saying the silly things that they occasionally say or doing the stupid things that they occasionally do. So we need to educate them, and we need to do so in a spirit of cooperation. And the second thing I have to say is to those who are supposedly non-disabled. As a friend of mine once said, you walk into a bar and talk to the first drunk you speak to, and you see who is really the handicapped person. We all have disabilities out there. We all have to approach each other not as being better or worse or better equipped or more illy equipped than the other. We have to approach each other as people who can teach each other something.